All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Parenting and Pregnancy podcast. Today's an exciting episode. I'm here with Shelly Rahim, and we are talking about wholesome support for new mothers. So, a lot of the times when we're talking about postpartum recovery, we're really focused on baby and baby's needs and how to take care of baby, but we don't, in my opinion, and I know Shelly shares this opinion, we don't spend enough time talking about the needs of the mother. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So Shelly, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and how what you do and how you got into this work?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. My business is called New Mother Caregiving, and I am a postpartum caregiver and a chef. And I've also been a birth doula for over a decade. I've taught prenatal yoga and birth classes. And I also have about a 10-year background in helping women heal from birth trauma. So my entire career for the past 15 years has been dedicated to serving mothers through every phase of the mothering process, from as soon as they get pregnant, guiding them in prenatal yoga, birth classes, and as a birth doula, and then meeting them on the other side to help them process their birth story, as well as taking care of them. And the type of postpartum caregiving that I do is it's also called postpartum doula, but it's I take care of moms for 40 days. They don't always hire me for 40 days, but that's sort of my best package is, I'm there the day they get home from the hospital, and I'm there for 40 days. I take the weekends off, but 6 weeks of care. And in that, I am cooking for them specialized foods every day. Everything that they eat is freshly made. And I track their digestion to make sure that they and them, the mother and the baby's digestion is assimilating the foods that I'm eating. And I gradually increase the complexity of the foods. And yeah, so every day I feed them and I bring them their food in bed so they rest. I help them with the baby, I help them with breastfeeding, but then I also give them a full body massage every day with warm sesame oil, and I bind their belly every day. So it's something that our culture has lost, but really this type of care is still happening all over the world. Maternal elders in non-Westernized nations still do a variation of what I do. And it's been done like this since the beginning of humanity until the last 4 generations or so in the Westernized countries.
That is fantastic. And I think you're right. I think, I know that there's a lot of cultures around the world that still practice this, but from kind of this American culture, you hear that and it kind of sounds radical. It sounds like excessive to some. But I think it's really something that we need to move back towards. You were talking about the specialized food and tracking digestion and being really careful about what you're giving to mother to eat. Can you explain a little bit about why we don't want to just order burgers from DoorDash?
Yeah, it's a really big topic, and I talk about this a lot on my Instagram handle at New Mother Caregiving. But it's pretty big. But if, in a nutshell, if you think about what the body goes through to give birth, for pregnancy and birth, honestly, um, your body expands, your rib cage widens, your abdominal wall is out here, your uterus is still the size of a watermelon the day after you give birth. It takes 6 weeks to shrink all the way back down to the pre-pregnancy size. Your ligaments, your pelvis, everything is still very loose and vulnerable. You may have a vaginal tear. You may have, a surgical wound from major surgery if you had a cesarean. So your body is in a very vulnerable state. And even just the act of giving birth, the digestion actually kind of shuts down. It goes into sort of a dormant state because all of the energy is being directed to birth that baby. It's very similar to like a marathon runner. Metabolically, we've just ran like a couple marathons. And if you know marathon runners, my husband runs marathons, and he doesn't just suddenly want to eat like a big heavy lasagna at mile 22. And that's for a good reason because, he does suck on some goo and some electrolytes and things like that. But the digestion shuts down to divert that energy to birth the baby. So there's a lot going on in the body. And so immediately after birth, her digestion, it's really hard to digest like a hamburger or lasagna or, even though people are well intentioned to bring these foods to moms. And also the other thing about this is moms feel very like, I've sacrificed, for my baby for 9 months. So I'm going to eat what I want. Haven't been able to eat sushi or all these things. And so they're like, give me what I want, as my reward for the birth. And that's kind of a psychological thing I think we've sort of gotten used to, that like this is our reward for birth. So just give me that, McDonald's or pizza or whatever. But I think we just need to kind of understand, we just don't understand what's happening to the body and how that actually makes the healing process slower when we put food in it that our body is just not really equipped in those vulnerable moments to properly digest and extract nutrients. However, when you make homemade bone broth and congee, which is like a mushy rice porridge, and you make that with some ghee, which is like a really rich fatty butter, these are very nutrient dense. They help to regenerate the tissues. They help you heal from the birth. They also help your milk to come in, and when it comes in, it gives it high quality for the baby. So babies are only sucking like a couple little drops those for that first day or two. But when you eat really well, your body's making that colostrum for the baby, and those couple drops are going to be even more nutrient dense, which is building the baby's brain, the baby's body in those days, and helping the baby to heal from the shock of birth as well. So food is very, very, very important. How we eat, what we eat after birth for the healing process. Yeah.
So really it is, it's a common analogy that you hear that food is your fuel. So if you're not putting in the right fuel, you're not going to get that function. It sounds like that's exactly what you're talking about. We're using the right fuel for the right stage of healing to help facilitate that healing the best that we can, help mom recover, and then down the road, then she's at optimal health to start reintroducing those foods to where her body can handle them and she can really enjoy them.
Exactly. Perfect analogy. Yes.
And what symptoms do you notice in mothers who maybe aren't aware of eating to support the postpartum body, and they are going right back to the sushi and the burgers and the lasagna that somebody was very kind to bring over to try and help ease some of that? What are kind of some of those symptoms that you see in moms who's kind of maybe overwhelming their digestive system a little bit?
Yeah, the number one symptom is postpartum constipation. And to be totally honest with you, my clients that I feed them at the moment they give birth. They only eat my protocol, my foods that I cook for them fresh. I even bring it to the hospital and everything. And they don't get constipated at all. Their first poop is smooth and easy, and there's no fear, there's no pain. And so they don't have to take Colace, which is the stool softener. It's a medication they give you when you give birth. First thing they give you, here, take the Colace, which is fine. Some women might need Colace to, so that they don't strain and push out their, poops. But it's another medication. We don't really want to keep taking medications if we don't have to, if we can get that through our food source. And my stewed fruits, it has iron, it has fiber, it has lots of other really good nutrients that you're getting. And, you don't have to take the Colace, and you're not constipated. And so constipation's the big one when we're eating random things. Bloating is also another big one, and gas, sometimes even cramping in the stomach. So just reflux or just heartburn, just the general things you would kind of experience if you ate something that just didn't settle well.
So I think a lot of these symptoms that you're explaining, like this, the bloating and the constipation and acid reflux and cramping and things like that, I think are oftentimes just assumed to be a part of the postpartum process. But it sounds to me like what you're saying is that's just a symptom, And so then we're taking a symptom, and instead of treating the underlying cause, like changing our diet, we're using a medication to treat the symptom, but we're not solving our underlying issue. Is that correct?
Yes, bingo. In my experience, now I can't say is that for everybody, but every mother, I mean, what can I tell you? But every single mother that I have fed who loves my food, I'm not depriving them of anything. Like they are like, oh my God, they eat my food and they're like, oh my God, yes, this is so good. Their body is just like, yes, they don't want, hamburgers and pizza. They're just like, this is so good. And that is my normal. But what we've done is we've normalized constipation, bloating, heartburn, all these things in our culture as it's just what birth does. But our bodies are much more intelligent than that. Our bodies aren't designed to just be gassy and bloated and constipated. It's the way we're treating them afterwards.
It's just our body telling us what's going on. It's just a symptom.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And so if there's a mother expecting, or maybe somebody, a loved one who wants to support a new mother, and she's hearing this discussion and she's thinking, well, that's great, but I'm not a chef. I can't hire Shelly. She doesn't live in my area. We can't afford a postpartum doula. Where would you recommend that they turn to learn about making these really nutritious meals and customizing this for a mother, and this method of postpartum support that you do? Where can people learn more?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. I wish I could send people to many, many places, but to be honest, the reason why I started New Mother Caregiving was because nothing that I knew of existed. And so you can go to my website, newmothercaregiving.com, and you can download that my post-birth recovery meal plan. It's a free ebook, and it's 27 pages, and it's kind of just a brief summary of why we need to feed moms this way, and my recipes that I give moms after birth. So it's got bone broth, congee, which is that mushy rice, stewed fruits, some lactation muffins, and some teas, and all the recipes are in this. Not only that, but also whenever I'm a birth doula, which I've been to over 150 births, and I always bring food. I tell my moms, don't eat the hospital food. Like it's going to set you back in healing. It's going to slow your healing down. And anyways, if you gave birth at 2 in the morning, you wouldn't really have any options anyway because the cafeteria is closed. So
Sandwich in a pudding cup.
whatever the nurse has, exactly, Jello or whatever, and ice water. Um, so yeah, so in this meal plan, I'm kind of telling you to take your nutrition in your own hands, and I'm giving you the tools to do that. Make the food in labor, or make it before you go into labor and put it in your freezer, and then grab it. And then I always bring a little mini crock pot. Have you seen those little crock pots that are like for appetizers?
Yeah, and they're only like $10. They're really not very expensive.
Yeah. So you don't even have to, because when COVID happened, they shut down the waiting area. Because I used to just go and like microwave the food for my clients, but then the microwaves are no longer there. So I just was like, all right, we're going to bring mini crock pots. We're going to just heat it up ourselves, bring my own little dishes, my thermos to keep the tea nice and warm. So all of my protocol for feeding a mom at the hospital is in that post birth recovery meal plan ebook. And then, to be honest, I'm really active on Instagram. So a lot of my tips are on there. It's even worth just opening up account just to like go and look at all the recipes, and I have caregiving tips on there. So you can, if you know somebody who's pregnant and you really want to do something to support them during their postpartum, my Instagram handle will have all kinds of really great ideas on how to go and clean their home for them. These kinds of things, it'll just really get you excited about how you can help a mom.
That is so great, because I think for so many of us, we want to help, but we don't know where to start. And so I'll leave the links to your website and your Instagram handle down below for people to check out. But actually, I discovered you on Instagram, and the very first I saw a reel from you, and it was, and I think it's one of your biggest ones, but it was everything we do for a new baby, we should be doing for a new mom. And I loved that so much because I'm also a postpartum doula, and there's a lot that I could learn from you about your recipes, and you just have so much great tips on there. But um, I just find that when people get a hold of me looking for a postpartum doula, or they're asking about a postpartum doula, it's always through the lens of the baby, or maybe, and then maybe mom can get a nap, and that's kind of the idea. And it's like, no, this is just as much for the mom, if not more for the mom than for the baby. Maybe I'm going to be helping you learn some tips for taking care of the baby. Maybe we're going to do some work on breastfeeding. Of course, that's all part of it, but the mother is, my favorite quote, it's on all my pamphlets and informational material, is new mothers need just as much support as new babies because they too have just been born.
Yes.
And so I love that. But why don't
Mm.
you tell us a little bit more about kind of that reel, right? That idea, that
Yeah,
concept of moms need just as much support as baby.
sure. Yeah, that I love that quote too. And I think that that is the difference is my care is mother-centered care. And it's also loving care. Like I bring in loving care, not just and it's like I somehow am able to just slip in and really, and I'm sure you do too, would just like love my clients as if they were my own daughter. And they really need that nurturing and that love. So that reel that you're speaking of, it's titled "Whatever the Baby Needs, the Mother Needs." So if the baby needs to be fed, so I have like the mom, she's like feeding the baby, like nursing the baby, and then I show myself feeding the mother in bed. And it's literally because moms need nourishment. They need to be fed, not just like eat, but they need to be fed because that you know how it is that first couple of days after birth, you're just trying to get the latch, trying to get the latch, trying to get the latch. And you don't have time to even get up and go in the kitchen and prepare yourself something to eat or sit down and eat. So it's sometimes we really literally just need to feed the mother in bed. And then the next clip is if the baby needs to be, I think the next one is if the baby needs to be held. No, that's the last one. So if the baby needs to be swaddled, the mother needs to be swaddled. And this one confused a lot of people. So I actually did some more reels about why do we want to swaddle the mother. And the reason what I mean by swaddling the mother is, well, I give the moms a full body massage. And then when I'm done with the massage, I literally like tuck the blankets around their body, almost like a mummy, tuck them in, tuck them in, tuck them in. So they're just like, and it's very, like, they're just like a mummy, right? They're like very held. And it's very grounding. It's very down regulating to their nervous system in the same way that the baby feels like safe. And what birth kind of does in a way, not like in real medical terms, but more like energetically, the nervous system just gets blasted open from birth. It's like this shock happens, right? And like, especially in the hospital when there's really no rest, people are coming and going in the room, and then you transition home, and it's like the nervous system is just. And so when we massage the mom, we give her some loving touch, and you don't even have to massage her. Just lay her body down, put a warm pack on her womb, and tuck her in like a mummy. Put an eye pack on her, take the baby, and let her body just down regulate and rest. Very, very healing. And a lot of times you'll find like the milk will come right in after that because that nervous system just needed to come down. So, and then the other part of it is if the baby needs to sleep, the mother needs to sleep. So we got to take the baby for the mother so she can sleep. And then the last one is if the baby needs to be held, then the mother needs to be held. And I show myself like hugging the mother. And that's really touched a lot of people because I think we've forgotten how hard it is emotionally, psychologically, physically to go through this great life transition. And we just need a hug. We just need someone to maybe perhaps listen to our birth story with compassion and without any judgment, and just hold our story in their heart, and just honor that this challenging situation that we've just gone through.
I love that. Um, and I love the way that you're focusing on kind of some of those profound effects and changes that happen. And it's really a nice segue into another thing I wanted to discuss, and that is I saw it's another service that you offer, but I think it's really important, and it's birth story processing. and talking about your birth story. Can you kind of share why that's important, why that's something that mothers benefit from?
Sure. Yeah, I think we're kind of starting to understand trauma a little bit better. I feel like you know, maybe like 20, 30 years ago. I know because I'm turning 50 this year, and I mean, I had some traumatic events happen to me when I was like 17, and the word trauma didn't really even exist. Like I didn't even go to therapy or anything. Like it just wasn't a real concept. Now, as we move into this, we have a better awareness in this day and age that of trauma and how it affects our mental health and our well-being. And giving birth, it can be, of course, like the most beautiful experience of our life. But even with that beauty, there can be trauma. And basically, what trauma is, in my definition, I'm not a therapist, I'm a birth story listener, which is different. But in my definition of trauma, which is a very common definition, but the one that I really like to use for birth trauma is anything that happens to you that's too much, too soon, and too fast for you to really like for your nervous system, for your body to really digest that experience and integrate it. So if you think about birth, there's so many moments that are too much too soon and too fast for you to really process in that moment. So what we do is we shelf them. We have this like little dresser and we're like, whoa, that was intense. Oh my God, how'd I get through that? All right. Okay. Whoa, another contraction's coming. And so we just put it in the drawer. But they're there. Those intense moments, they don't just go away, they're there. And then once we get through the birth and we're on the other side, it's very important. Like our mind will need to process those. It'll kind of open that drawer up, and suddenly a memory will pop up from our birth. We'll be sitting there in the middle of the night nursing our baby, and then it's like this one moment replays over and over and over and over. And that's that moment that really needs to be processed. And so if you have somebody that's coming to your home the next day, who can listen, you can say, hey, can I share with you just this moment from my birth? It was kind of, I feel a little bit like, you know, cheated, or I feel like kind of abandoned, or I felt kind of bullied actually. Just name those feelings, talk to somebody about it, or write it in your journal. Just write about it. That helps you to really slow the brain down, and it helps you to really process that moment. And I also have questions, which I can leave in the show notes if you'd like. If you are kind of a writer and that really helps you, write it out, stream of conscious writing, just let it all pour out onto the page. And then look at these questions, because the questions will kind of help you maybe find peace with the moment rather than feeling like, oh, it's my fault. I should have done this. Oh, it's their fault. They didn't treat me right. That kind of mindset won't really bring any healing. And so the questions might help you kind of get a little bit deeper.
Have you found that mothers who process this um, have a better time handling with some of the emotional changes of postpartum?
Yes. So I think one of the reasons why we have such a high postpartum depression rate in our country is because nobody's processing their birth story. Nobody knows how. And if you go to a therapist, therapists, of course, are invaluable. We need therapy. Not everybody can afford therapy, first of all. It's not covered by insurance. Not every insurance covers therapy. Very expensive. But usually you go to therapy, you can't go to therapy 2 or 3 days when those moments are still fresh. Most people go to therapy maybe 6 months later. And by then, it's still going to help you. I'm not saying don't go to therapy, but by then, that moment, so maybe you had a moment where you were stuck on, I wanted a natural birth. I really want a natural birth, but something happened in your birth that just, the circumstances were as such that the epidural was the next best thing for you. And that's what you needed. But you were hoping to avoid that. So then you think, oh, well, if I would have just hired a doula, if I would have changed doctors, if I would have, or if that nurse wasn't there, or if that doctor wasn't there, or if, so right, if you're stuck on this, then there's some shame. And then what happens is that becomes your birth story, which is profound and filled with power and strength in there. Um, you're then it becomes kind of like a shameful story for you, and then you internalize that as like, oh, my body failed, I failed, or some negative message, and then you carry that through, and that kind of just weighs you down as a mother. That's the message that you're telling yourself from your birth, which breaks my heart, because every single birth is exactly how it's meant to be, and it's laden with so much, beauty and strength, in even in those moments.
I agree. It is really a shame the way that a lot of moms will carry this. And I think I've noticed that as well, that I mean, I know there's a lot of factors that play into postpartum depression. So in no way I'm saying that birth um, trauma or birth experiences are the sole contributor. But I think one expression I hear all the time that I really don't like, while I understand the message behind it, is, well, all that matters is a healthy mom and a healthy baby. And yes, it we always want a healthy mom and a healthy baby, but to me it feels beside the point. Like, I think we all agree that with that. I've never met anybody who said, well, my baby was happier and my baby was healthier with a C-section, but I wish I had just tried for that natural birth anyways, even though the baby wasn't tolerating it. I've never heard
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah,
And
it's a,
so
it's a given.
I think it's such a devalidating expression. And then I hear mothers who did maybe have, mothers who were really trying to have a vaginal delivery and had to have that C-section, or they needed some Pitocin and so it was more intense, and things didn't go the way they wanted, and they even feel like they need to be repeating that themselves. Well, like, yeah, it wasn't what I wanted and it didn't go as planned, but at least my baby's healthy. At least I'm healthy. It had to happen. And even if all of that is true, I think it's even mothers devalidating their own feelings and their own experience, and can create a lot of fear going into doing it again, and can, I think, sometimes make it harder um, to bond with baby because you don't feel like yourself.
Yeah, it's a mask. It's not honoring what you really went through, and it is something we all have been caught in, because we don't know how to listen to birth stories, we don't know how to share them. And mothers who say that themselves, like, that is, they're afraid of feeling judged, because they care about their own journey, that they actually think that, I mean, they're trying to process, and our mental health and our emotional health is equally as important as our physical health. And it is, but our society hasn't caught up to that yet. And so that's why a mom will say that, like, oh, but at least, the baby's healthy. It's because she doesn't want to get that judgment for thinking about herself. Other people are saying that because they don't mean to be, it's basically shaming her. Like, we're shaming her for um, thinking about herself here, when all that should really matter is your baby's alive. you know like, that's kind of implied, although we don't mean to be. These people are not ill intended. It's just that we don't know how to listen and hold space for that. It's uncomfortable for us when someone starts to cry, and it's like, oh my god, like, she's like, this trauma is coming out, and I don't know what to say. And so we're trying to comfort them with that. Things could be worse, right? um but it doesn't work. So what we can do instead is we can um, not say that. It might come up to say it, but just like let it kind of go by your mind, like subtitles in a movie, but don't say it. And then don't say anything. And just listen, and have compassion. And then you can say, instead, if you want to say something and it feels appropriate, you can just validate her and just say, wow, that sounds like a really challenging situation. And then if she feels like, oh yeah, it was, then say, how did you know to do that? How did you know in that moment that it was the right thing to do? Because no one's asked her that, guaranteed. She has not asked herself that. She's only thinks she's done something wrong and bad. So when you hold space for her and you're listening and you're like, in that moment, like, sure, we can look at that moment now, 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, however long later, and look back on it and go, I didn't really want to do that. That wasn't my birth plan. But in that moment, with everything going on, that was the best thing, or otherwise you wouldn't have done it. And so if we hold that first and foremost, and then ask her, well, how did you know that was the right thing to do? Then she will kind of shift out of the shame story and into, how did I know? You know what? Actually, there was something really deep in my bones that just knew, like, if I didn't do this, my baby wasn't going to be okay. I had to do it to pretty much like save my baby's life, honestly. And they realize from their own, like, when you ask them these questions, they heal, and they realize their power and their strength and their sacrifice as a mother that they did for the baby. They let go of their fantasy birth, and it's for their baby, and they, like, some of them lay their bodies down and face their greatest fear, for their baby's life. I mean, that's just heroic.
And
And so
I
that's,
think, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I'm done.
Oh, well, I think it's reframing it
Yeah.
to looking at the strength of the mother and that intuition of the mother takes it from a story of shame to a story of triumph and protective motherhood. And look, before your baby's even born, you're already doing everything you can to protect your child. And so then you can look at it from that perspective. But how would you say, even though we're looking at like that, like you did everything you need to do, you were tapping into your instincts as a mother and doing what you believed was right for your baby. But how do we validate that and help with that paradigm shift while still making sure that we're validating, but that was hard. That was not what you wanted. Really quickly, what would you say to a mother who you were kind of making that paradigm shift? How would you still make sure you're validating, but it's still okay that you weren't okay with that or
Hmm.
you didn't want that?
Yeah, I mean, I think just saying, like, yeah, I mean, grieve the loss of the birth that you were really hoping for yourself and for your family. Those were beautiful intentions to want a water birth, or whatever it was, the skin to skin, that you didn't get, the golden hour that you didn't, or whatever. Like, yeah, it's you might want to really just grieve that. That was a beautiful vision you had for bringing your baby into the world. um and then also this is going to be really mind blowing, but even the most traumatic, the most horrific birth stories I've heard, there are moments of ecstatic beauty and love that are there. It's like nothing can take that away from us. So even though this image of, like, the water birth with the candles and the golden hour and the skin to skin and this, that is beautiful and that's possible for a lot of people, but for a lot of people it's not. And if you don't get that, but yours looks different, um, even in, like, so ask them, like, because there's powerful, insanely courageous, beautiful moments of connection in every single birth, whether it's with yourself, with your baby, with a random nurse you've never met, an anesthesiologist, your partner, your husband. There's just like a moment somewhere that was like powerful and life changing. And so you can ask them, validate that they need to grieve and let that go, that vision they had, but then ask them, so do you have a favorite moment? And I guarantee you nobody's asked them this, because everyone's focused on the problem. What went wrong? What did I do wrong? Who did everything wrong? How can I do different next time? That's not going to heal. But you ask them, what what's your favorite moment? And it might be, of course, like a lot of people's favorite moment is when they see their baby for the first time. But what's your second favorite moment? And not to minimize that moment of seeing your baby for the first time. That spend some time processing that. But then is there another moment? And then they'll be like, you know what? Yeah, like I was laying on the operating table and like I was just shaking and cold and like, and then this anesthesiologist just held my hand and just said, "You are so strong." And I just felt the warmth come into me and my body softened. And I felt this connection with the universe and this person that I didn't even know. And like, I mean, I'm just giving an example of the things women tell me when I ask them this question. And it's like, how freaking powerful is that? Who would have expected that, you know? And that's who you are. That's who you're becoming, is this person who's connected with, in these ways, even in your time of greatest despair and trauma, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so that, you know, that can really get people shifting.
Well, Shelley, I love that there are ways that we can rephrase or reframe and really change our perspective of a mother's birth and help her change her perspective while still validating um, what has happened that maybe wasn't what she wanted, or that trauma that she experienced. And I know you have a lot of great information on your Instagram as well. I've seen some of the guidance that you give for people supporting new mothers about listening to birth stories and kind of what to say and maybe things to stay clear of that are kind of common when we don't know what to say. Um, but so anyone who wants to learn more about this, who knows that they have a mother that they would like to support in this way and hear her birth story, definitely go check out her Instagram. And then there's also so many great recipes and just so many topics that we're just not discussing, like I think we really need to. So, Shelley, would you tell us maybe remind us where we can find you, and then tell us if there's any other resources that you have for the community that expectant parents might want to check out?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This conversation has been great and I hope it's helpful for people. Yeah. So newmothercaregiving.com. I have a blog post there, and I also have I'll have my online course actually launching in August of 2022. It's an online course that'll teach families how to do the birth story listening, how to do caregiving, how to feed a mom, all the recipes, the meal plan, the preparation. So it's a great course that's coming out, and yeah, and then the Instagram handle at New Mother Caregiving is also a good resource as well.
Fantastic. Uh, and remind me, what services do you provide to families? I know you have some virtual services, is that correct?
Oh yeah, I should have mentioned. I also do first story listening sessions over Zoom. So if you feel like you know you want to process your birth story, and your baby's never too old. You know, I have women with grown children that are coming to me to process their birth story. So I do birth story sessions over Zoom. I also do group birth story sessions over Zoom and in person, which I love because like moms groups, they get together and they talk about their births and they need somebody to kind of guide them through that. I do that. And then also I do postpartum consultations, and I have a virtual postpartum caregiving program that I do. And then I'm in San Diego, California. So I offer postpartum massage and belly binding and meal service for my full postpartum caregiving there.
In San Diego. Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I will have all of these great resources linked in the show notes. That some of those recipes that we were talking about and the questions to ask and so many great things. So take a look down there, and be sure to follow Shelly on Instagram at um,
New mother. Yeah, new
Mother's
mother.
Caregiving,
Just new
right?
mother caregiving.
New
Mm-hmm.
Mother Caregiving.
Yeah.
And you can find that down below as well. So thank you so much, Shelley, for taking the time.
Thank you.
I think this is such a hopeful topic to discuss, and I'm so glad that you were able to share all of these really invaluable tips with us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Sydney.
You're welcome. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.